Ambassador Zethkri's four eyes blinked in sequence as she stared at the silent communication array. For the first time in 200 cycles, no messages flickered across the quantum channels from the Sol system. The human delegation's chairs sat empty in the Grand Assembly Hall, their absence creating an uncomfortable void that seemed to press against everyone present. "Still nothing?" asked Councillor Vextar, his chitinous frame clicking nervously as he approached the communication station. His species, the Kythera, had been monitoring galactic communications for over 3 millennia, and never had they witnessed such complete radio silence from an active member species. "Complete blackout," Zethkri confirmed, her tentacles dancing across the control interface with practiced precision. Every frequency, every quantum channel, even the basic emergency beacons. It's as if humanity simply vanished. The massive chamber buzzed with worried conversations from the assembled representatives of 47 different species. The Galactic Council had convened an emergency session 3 days ago when the first reports came in. Human ships had stopped responding to hails. Human colonies had gone dark. Even the bustling trade stations around Earth's moon had fallen silent. "Perhaps their technology failed?" suggested Ambassador Quindal, though her melodic voice carried little conviction. The crystalline being's form shimmered with uncertainty, casting prismatic patterns across the polished floor. "Their computer systems are rather primitive compared to our bio-neural networks." Vextar's mandibles clicked in disagreement. "Impossible. We've observed their rapid technological advancement. In just 500 cycles since first contact, they've gone from crude chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel. Their adaptive capabilities are unsettling." The word hung in the air like a toxic gas. Many species found humanity's rapid progress disturbing, but none could deny their effectiveness. While other species had taken tens of thousands of years to develop interstellar capabilities, humans had managed it in what amounted to a cosmic blink of an eye. Admiral Korzen of the Hegemony Defense Force stepped forward, his massive reptilian frame casting a shadow over the smaller delegates. "My scouts report something far more concerning than mere communication failure. Human ships are moving with purpose throughout their territory. Military formations, construction fleets, massive cargo vessels carrying unknown materials. They're not silent because of technical problems. They're silent by choice." This revelation sent waves of panic through the assembly. The Galactic Council operated on the principle of transparency and cooperation. Member species shared technological advances, coordinated expansion efforts, and maintained constant diplomatic contact. The idea that humanity might be deliberately cutting ties violated every treaty they had signed. What could drive them to such extreme action? Zethkri wondered aloud, accessing the historical records with practiced ease. Their last official communication was routine. Ambassador Chen submitted the quarterly trade reports, requested permission for 3 new colony expeditions, and confirmed their commitment to the Kepler Accords. Nothing suggested any dissatisfaction. Councillor Morthak, representing the ancient archivist, projected a holographic timeline above the assembly floor. His species had maintained galactic records for over 50,000 years, and their vast libraries contained the history of every known civilization. Analysis of human behavioral patterns suggests a correlation with perceived threats to their autonomy. They exhibit extreme defensive responses when they believe their sovereignty is compromised. "But we've done nothing to threaten their independence," protested Ambassador Yilnara, her gaseous form swirling with indignation. "The Council has been more than accommodating to their unusual customs and aggressive territorial claims." Admiral Korzen's expression darkened. "Have we? 3 cycles ago, we denied their request to establish colonies in the Proxima sector, citing the hegemony's historical claims. Last cycle, we imposed sanctions on their quantum computing research after the synthetics expressed concerns about artificial intelligence development. And just last month, we voted to limit their military ship construction, following complaints from the pacifist coalition." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. What the Council had viewed as reasonable diplomatic negotiations, humanity might have interpreted as systematic suppression of their growth and development. "They're remarkably sensitive about restrictions," admitted Quindal. During the trade regulation debates, their representative became visibly agitated when we suggested monitoring their cargo shipments. Something about unwarranted government interference and taxation without representation, whatever that means. Zethkri accessed deeper historical files, her expression growing more troubled with each data stream. There's something else. Human psychological profiles indicate they have an unusual relationship with authority. Most species develop hierarchical social structures that naturally extend to interstellar governance. Humans seem to have an almost pathological resistance to external control, even when that control is beneficial. Pathological? Admiral Corzin questioned. Their own historical records show repeated patterns of violent rebellion against perceived oppression. They've fought wars over concepts like freedom and independence that most species would consider abstract luxuries. For humans, autonomy appears to be a fundamental need, like water or oxygen. Counselor Vexitar's antennae twitched with sudden understanding. They're not just angry about our recent decisions. They're fundamentally incompatible with council authority. We've been slowly imposing the very thing their species is programmed to resist. The weight of this realization settled over the assembly like a heavy blanket. The Galactic Council had always operated under the assumption that rational beings would naturally desire peaceful cooperation and shared governance. The idea that an entire species might reject this premise challenged their most basic assumptions about civilization itself. "What do we do?" asked Ambassador Yilnara, her form rippling with anxiety. "If they've decided to sever all ties, how do we respond?" The humans control 17 star systems and maintain the largest merchant fleet in the galaxy. Their absence would destabilize trade routes across 3 spiral arms. Admiral Corzin studied the tactical displays showing human territory. More concerning is their military capability. They've built their fleet with an emphasis on mobility and firepower that we initially dismissed as crude. Now I'm wondering if we misunderstood their strategic thinking. Zethkri pulled up combat analysis reports from the few conflicts humans had participated in since joining the Council. Their tactical doctrine is unlike anything we've encountered. They don't fight for territory or resources in the traditional sense. They fight for principles, for ideas. They've never lost a defensive war, and they've never surrendered when they believed their cause was just. The implications were terrifying. The Council had thousands of years of experience dealing with reasonable species who understood the benefits of compromise and cooperation. They had no precedent for handling a species that might choose conflict over perceived submission. "We need to find out what they're planning," Admiral Corzin declared, "and we need to do it quickly, before their silence turns into something far worse." Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the massive construction project unfold through the viewport. Thousands of human ships moved in perfect coordination around the skeletal framework of something unprecedented in galactic history. The structure stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, its purpose hidden behind layers of classified engineering specifications. "Ma'am, Admiral Rodriguez is requesting an update on the defensive perimeter," reported Lieutenant Commander Zhang, his fingers dancing across the tactical display. Around them, the bridge crew worked with the quiet efficiency that had become humanity's trademark among the stars. "Tell the Admiral that Grid 7 is complete. We have full sensor coverage of the outer system now. Nothing gets in or out without our knowing about it." Sarah's voice carried the weight of months of intensive preparation. Every human in the fleet understood the gravity of their situation, though most didn't know the complete scope of what they were building. The communication blackout hadn't been easy to maintain. Cutting all diplomatic ties with the Galactic Council went against everything humans had learned about interstellar relations. But recent intelligence had revealed something that changed everything. The Council wasn't the benevolent organization it claimed to be. "Captain, we're receiving reports from the mining operations on Kepler 442b. The extraction teams have exceeded their quotas by 30%. The quantum foundries are working around the clock," Zhang continued, scrolling through endless streams of data. Sarah nodded grimly. The scale of their current operation required resources on an almost incomprehensible level. Every human colony, every mining station, every industrial facility had been converted to support this single massive project. It was the largest coordinated effort in human history, and they were running out of time. "Any word from our intelligence network?" she asked, knowing the answer would likely be unsettling. Agent Morrison transmitted his latest report 6 hours ago. "The Council is definitely getting suspicious. They've dispatched reconnaissance ships to 3 of our border systems. Our people on the inside confirm that they're considering more direct action. The intelligence network was humanity's secret weapon, something the Council had never suspected." While other species viewed espionage as dishonorable or unnecessary, humans had quietly placed agents throughout the galactic government structure. What they had discovered was chilling. The Galactic Council wasn't just a cooperative organization. It was a carefully designed system for controlling younger species, preventing them from developing the power to challenge the established order. Every reasonable restriction, every protective regulation, every beneficial treaty had been crafted to keep emerging civilizations dependent and weak. "Captain Chen," came a new voice from the communication station. "Admiral Rodriguez is requesting your presence in Conference Room Alpha. Priority 1. Sarah handed bridge control to her executive officer and made her way through the ship's corridors. The Defiance was one of humanity's newest vessels, designed with lessons learned from decades of galactic politics. Unlike the Council's preference for large, impressive ships that demonstrated power, human vessels prioritized speed, stealth, and devastating firepower. The conference room was filled with the top military and scientific minds of humanity. Admiral Rodriguez stood at the head of the table, her weathered face showing the strain of recent months. Behind her, a holographic display showed the current status of their construction project. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the point of no return," Rodriguez began without preamble. "Our intelligence confirms that the Council is planning what they call corrective intervention. They're going to invade human space under the pretense of humanitarian assistance." Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the project's chief scientist, leaned forward. "Admiral, the gateway isn't complete. We need at least another 2 weeks to finish the quantum field generators and stabilize the dimensional matrix." "We don't have 2 weeks. Our agents report that the Council fleet is already assembling. 300 ships from 7 different species, all under the command of Admiral Corzen. They'll arrive in Sol System within 10 days. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Gateway Project represented humanity's most ambitious scientific achievement, a technology that would revolutionize space travel and change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. But it required precise calibration and careful testing to avoid catastrophic failure. "What about the terraforming worlds?" asked General Kim, representing the Colonial Defense Forces. "We have over 2 million civilians on the outer colonies. They can't defend themselves against a Council fleet." "The evacuation ships are already en route," Rodriguez replied. "But we can only save about 60% of the population before the Council arrives. The rest will have to hide in the deep underground facilities and hope for the best." Sarah felt the familiar weight of command decisions that would affect millions of lives. This was the burden of being human in a galaxy that viewed their species as a useful, but ultimately disposable tool. The Council had made it clear through their actions that humanity would be allowed to exist only as long as they remained compliant and weak. "There is another option," Dr. Harper said quietly. "We could activate the gateway now without full testing. The quantum calculations suggest a 73% chance of successful activation." "And if it fails?" asked Admiral Rodriguez. "Complete dimensional collapse. Not just the gateway, but potentially the entire Sol system. The quantum shockwave could tear apart local spacetime." The room erupted in heated discussions. Some argued for the immediate activation, viewing it as their only chance for survival. Others insisted that they needed more time, that rushing the process would guarantee failure. A few suggested surrendering to the Council and hoping for lenient treatment. Sarah listened to the arguments while studying the tactical displays. 300 Council ships against humanity's entire fleet of 87 vessels. The humans had better technology and superior tactics, but the numbers were overwhelming. Even if they won the battle, it would be a Pyrrhic victory that left humanity too weak to resist future Council actions. "What exactly does the Gateway do?" asked Colonel Martinez, one of the newer additions to the command staff. The project had been compartmentalized for security reasons, with only a few people knowing the complete specifications. Dr. Harper activated a detailed hologram showing the massive structure under construction. "It's a dimensional gateway, Colonel. Not just faster than light travel, but instantaneous transportation across galactic distances. More importantly, It's bidirectional and scalable. We can move entire fleets, whole populations, even planets if necessary. The Council species have nothing like this, Admiral Rodriguez added. Their fastest ships require weeks to cross the distances we could traverse in seconds. It would fundamentally shift the balance of power. Which is exactly why they'll do everything possible to stop us, Sarah realized. They know we're building something. They may not know what, but they understand that it represents a threat to their control. The discussion continued for hours, examining every possible strategy and contingency plan. By the time they adjourned, the decision had been made through the peculiar form of democracy that had evolved in humanity's military structure. They would continue construction and preparation while maintaining combat readiness. If the Council fleet arrived before the gateway was complete, they would fight with everything they had. As Sarah returned to the bridge, she reflected on the irony of their situation. The Council had forced humanity into this position through their systematic oppression, never realizing that pressure only made humans more determined and resourceful. Now they faced a species that had been pushed beyond their breaking point, armed with technology that could reshape the galaxy. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander Zhang reported as she resumed her position, "we're receiving reports of unusual quantum fluctuations from the Gateway construction site. Dr. Harper says they're ahead of schedule on the primary stabilizers." Sarah smiled grimly. Perhaps they would have their 2 weeks after all. And perhaps the Council was about to learn why humanity had never lost a war they truly believed in. Agent David Morrison adjusted his biomask as he walked through the corridors of the Council intelligence complex on Centauri Prime. To any casual observer, he appeared to be Zekalon Vorth, a mid-level analyst from the Hegemony Intelligence Division. The biotechnology that made such deep cover possible was just one of humanity's secret advantages, carefully hidden from their supposed allies. Morrison had spent 3 years building his cover identity, slowly climbing the ranks of the galactic intelligence community. The Council species were remarkably trusting, their advanced societies having eliminated most forms of deception from their daily lives. They simply couldn't conceive that another species might be systematically infiltrating their most secure installations. Analyst Vorth called Director Kemtar as Morrison entered the briefing chamber. "Your timing is perfect. We've just received authorization for Operation Shepherding." Morrison maintained his calm exterior while internally processing the implications. Operation Shepherding was the Council's classified plan for dealing with rebellious member species. He had been trying to uncover the details for months, knowing that humanity was likely the primary target. "Excellent, Director. How may I assist with the operation?" Morrison asked, his voice perfectly mimicking the hegemony dialect he had spent years mastering. "Your psychological profile analysis of human behavior patterns has been instrumental in planning our approach," Kemtar explained, gesturing to a holographic display that showed detailed intelligence on human colonies and military installations. "The Strategic Planning Committee wants your assessment of likely resistance patterns." Morrison studied the display with growing horror. The Council had been monitoring humanity far more extensively than anyone had suspected. They possessed detailed layouts of human cities, military bases, and even civilian infrastructure. Worse, they had psychological profiles of key human leaders and detailed analysis of human tactical doctrine. "The humans will likely concentrate their forces in the Sol system," Morrison reported, drawing on his genuine knowledge while carefully omitting crucial details. "Their emotional attachment to their homeworld makes them predictable. They'll sacrifice outlying colonies to protect Earth." This was partially true, but Morrison knew that humanity's real strategy was far more complex. The Council was expecting a conventional defensive response, not the revolutionary technology that was nearing completion in the outer system. "Precisely our assessment," agreed Kemtar, "which is why Phase 1 of shepherding involves occupying their colonial worlds before they can retreat to Sol. We estimate that losing 70% of their territory will force them to negotiate." "And if they refuse to surrender?" Morrison asked, though he dreaded the answer. Director Kemtar's expression darkened, his reptilian features showing predatory satisfaction. "Phase 2 involves what our Strategic Ethics Committee has classified as necessary population reduction." The humans have proven remarkably resistant to standard diplomatic pressure. More direct methods may be required. Morrison felt his blood run cold but forced himself to maintain his cover. The casual way the director discussed genocide revealed the true nature of the Galactic Council's peaceful civilization. They were willing to exterminate entire species, rather than allow them to develop beyond Council control. How extensive would this population reduction be? Morrison asked, needing to know the full scope of what humanity faced. Preliminary calculations suggest reducing human population by 60 to 70% would be sufficient to ensure compliance. We would preserve their most useful specialists and enough breeding stock to maintain genetic diversity. The Council's xenobiologists assure us that humans can recover from such losses within 2 centuries. The clinical terminology couldn't disguise the monstrous reality. The Council was planning to murder billions of humans and reduce the survivors to the status of controlled breeding animals. Morrison realized that humanity's decision to cut diplomatic contact had been absolutely correct, even if they hadn't known the full extent of the threat they faced. When does Operation Shepherding commence? Morrison asked, forcing his voice to remain steady. The fleet assembles in 6 days. Admiral Corzin has requested your presence as a strategic advisor. Your insights into human psychology could prove valuable during the initial contact attempts. Morrison nodded, already planning how to get this information to the human fleet. His cover identity gave him access to nearly every aspect of the operation, including fleet movements, tactical plans, and communication protocols. If he could transmit the complete intelligence package, humanity might actually have a chance. Director, I'll need access to the tactical planning files to prepare my psychological assessment. The humans have some unusual cultural taboos that could affect their response to our ultimatums. Of course, I'm granting you Level 7 clearance for Operation Shepherding materials. The Strategic Planning Committee wants your final report within 4 days. Morrison spent the next several hours downloading every piece of intelligence he could access. The scope of the Council's surveillance was staggering. They had been monitoring human communications, infiltrating human institutions, and even conducting secret biological experiments on human subjects for decades. The most disturbing revelation was the Council's long-term plan for humanity. Even if humans submitted completely to Council authority, they were ultimately slated for evolutionary guidance. The Council's scientists had identified several human genetic traits they considered dangerous: aggression, independence, rapid adaptation, and what they termed excessive creativity. Their plan involved gradually modifying human genetics over several generations, creating a more docile and controllable subspecies. The current human population was viewed as a transitional generation, useful for manual labor and military service but ultimately disposable. Morrison also discovered intelligence about other species that had undergone similar shepherding operations. The Kythera had once been a spacefaring civilization with colonies across multiple star systems. After resisting Council authority, they had been reduced to a single world and genetically modified to be more compliant. The crystalline Quindal had originally been a species of individuals, but Council intervention had forced them into a collective consciousness that was easier to control. Humanity wasn't the first species to face this threat, but they might be the first with the technology and determination to successfully resist. As Morrison prepared to transmit his intelligence package, he accessed one final set of files: the Council's assessment of human capabilities. Their analysis was both accurate and terrifyingly incomplete. They understood human military tactics and technological development, but they had completely missed humanity's greatest advantage: the ability to innovate under pressure. The Council expected humans to fight like other species, following established patterns and conventional strategies. They had no concept of the revolutionary approach that humanity might employ when backed into a corner. Their own advanced civilization had made them predictable, while humanity's relative youth made them capable of solutions that no established species would consider. Morrison activated his quantum transmitter, using a carefully constructed burst pattern that would appear to be routine background radiation. The message would take 8 hours to reach the human fleet, but it contained everything humanity needed to know about the approaching threat. As he completed the transmission, Morrison reflected on the irony of his situation. The Council's own intelligence apparatus was being used against them by the very species they sought to control. He had become living proof that humanity's talent for adaptation and deception was far beyond what their enemies understood. Now he just had to survive long enough to see whether that would be enough to save his species. In 6 days, the largest fleet in galactic history would depart for human space. The question was whether humanity would be ready for them. Morrison deleted all traces of his activities and returned to his routine duties, playing the role of a loyal council analyst while counting down the hours until humanity's greatest test began. The galaxy was about to discover why the phrase "never corner a human" had become an unofficial motto among Earth's military forces. Admiral Rodriguez stood in the command center deep within the asteroid fortress of Ceres, watching as streams of intelligence data flowed across the massive holographic displays. Morrison's transmission had arrived 8 hours ago, and the implications were still sending shockwaves through the human command structure. "Ma'am, we've finished analyzing the Council fleet composition," reported Colonel Hassan, her voice tight with concern. 312 vessels, including 47 dreadnoughts and 6 planetary bombardment ships. They're bringing enough firepower to glass every human world simultaneously. "What's our fleet strength?" Rodriguez asked, though she already knew the answer would be sobering. 89 ships combat ready, including the Defiance and our 12 heavy cruisers. We're outnumbered nearly 4-1, and their individual ships are larger than ours. Rodriguez studied the tactical projections, her mind racing through possible strategies. The human fleet had been built for speed and maneuverability, designed to strike quickly and retreat before superior forces could respond. But this wasn't a hit-and-run scenario. The Council was coming to end humanity's independence permanently. What about the Gateway Project? Where do we stand on the timeline? Dr. Harper materialized on the holographic communication system, transmitted from the construction site near Pluto. "Admiral, we've made significant progress since Morrison's intelligence arrived. Knowing the exact timeline has allowed us to prioritize critical systems. The primary dimensional matrix is stable, and we've completed 68% of the secondary stabilizers. Bottom line, Doctor, can we activate it before they arrive?" Harper paused, her expression troubled. "We can attempt activation in 72 hours. But Admiral, the risk is enormous. If the stabilization field fails during startup, the dimensional cascade could destroy everything within 3 light years. We're talking about losing Sol System, Alpha Centauri, and potentially Barnard's star." The command center fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. The Gateway represented humanity's only chance for survival, but activating it prematurely could accomplish the Council's goal of human extinction more efficiently than any fleet action. "There's something else," Dr. Harper continued. "Morrison's intelligence includes detailed specifications of Council shield technology and quantum field manipulation systems. I believe we can modify the Gateway to create a directed effect rather than an omnidirectional one." "Meaning what exactly?" Rodriguez asked. "Instead of opening a portal for travel, we could weaponize the dimensional distortion, create a controlled gravitational anomaly that would affect only designated targets. Think of it as a selective black hole that we can aim." Colonel Hassan leaned forward. "Could we target the Council fleet specifically?" "Theoretically, yes. The quantum signatures from Morrison's data would allow us to lock onto their specific ship configurations. But Admiral, this is completely untested technology. We would literally be conducting the first trial during combat conditions." Rodriguez walked to the tactical display showing the approach vectors of the Council fleet. They were coming from multiple directions, clearly planning to surround human space and prevent any escape. It was a classic encirclement strategy, designed to force surrender through overwhelming superiority. "Show me the evacuation status," she ordered. Display shifted to show human colonial worlds, and the massive civilian transport operation underway. Thousands of ships were carrying refugees from the outer colonies toward the inner system, while others headed for the hidden bases established in recent months. "We've evacuated 47% of the civilian population," reported General Kim via quantum communication from the Colonial Coordination Center. "But Admiral, the logistics are breaking down. We simply don't have enough transport capacity to move everyone before the Council arrives." "How many people are we talking about?" Rodriguez asked, dreading the answer. "Approximately 8 million civilians will be stranded on the outer worlds when the Council fleet arrives. They'll be completely defenseless." Rodriguez closed her eyes, feeling the weight of command crushing down on her. 8 million lives hung in the balance, along with the future of human civilization. Every decision she made would echo through history, assuming humanity survived to have a history. "Admiral," came a new voice from the communication array. "This is Captain Peterson aboard the UES Constellation. I'm transmitting from the Kepler 442 system. We've got a problem." "Report, Captain. Council advanced scouts just entered the system. 3 ships moving in formation toward our mining colonies. They're not responding to any communications, but they're conducting detailed scans of our facilities." Rodriguez cursed under her breath. The Council was moving faster than their intelligence had indicated. The main fleet wasn't supposed to arrive for another 6 days, but these scouts could provide targeting data for the planetary bombardment ships. "Captain Peterson, you are authorized to engage the Council scouts. Do not allow them to escape with intelligence on our defensive preparations." "Understood, Admiral. Constellation is moving to intercept." Rodriguez turned to her staff officers. "This changes our timeline. If they have scouts conducting reconnaissance, the main fleet could arrive in as little as 4 days. Dr. Harper, we need to know if early activation is possible." "Admiral, I can have the basic gateway systems online in 48 hours. But the targeting computers for a weaponized version would take at least another day. We'd be operating with minimal safety protocols and no backup systems." "What are the odds of success?" "For basic portal generation, about 60%. For the weaponized version targeting specific ships, maybe 30%. And Admiral, if it fails catastrophically, we won't get a second chance." Rodriguez studied the faces of her staff, seeing her own determination reflected in their expressions. These were the best minds humanity had produced, and they all understood what was at stake. The Council had forced this confrontation by their systematic oppression and planned genocide. Now humanity would respond in the only way they knew how, by refusing to surrender. "Dr. Harper, begin preparations for gateway activation in 48 hours. Weaponized configuration. Colonel Hassan, I want every ship in the fleet ready for combat in 36 hours. We're going to make our stand in Sol system." "Admiral," interrupted the communications officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Captain Peterson." The holographic display shifted to show the Constellation's bridge. Captain Peterson's face was grim, but his voice carried a note of satisfaction. "Mission accomplished, Admiral. All 3 Council scouts have been destroyed, but they managed to transmit for approximately 30 seconds before we could stop them." "Any idea what they transmitted?" "Sensor data on our asteroid fortifications and fleet positions. The good news is that they couldn't have detected the gateway construction site. It's too far out and we had stealth fields active." Rodriguez nodded. "Excellent work, Captain. Return to Sol system immediately. The real fight is about to begin." As the communication ended, Rodriguez looked around the command center one more time. In less than 4 days, this room would either be the nerve center of humanity's greatest victory, or the final headquarters of a dying species. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to her staff, "we have 48 hours to prepare for the most important battle in human history. The Council is coming to exterminate us, but they're about to learn something that every human child knows: we don't go quietly into the night." The command center erupted in activity as officers and technicians rushed to implement the final preparations. Across human space, the greatest mobilization in the species' history was reaching its climax. Every ship, every weapon, every brilliant mind was focused on a single goal: proving that humanity deserved to exist as free beings in the galaxy. The Council was about to discover that their carefully calculated plan had one fatal flaw. They had never faced an enemy willing to risk everything, rather than accept subjugation. Admiral Corzin stood on the command deck of the Council flagship Eternal Harmony, watching the final preparations for humanity's subjugation. The massive vessel stretched for over 3 kilometers, its bio-organic hull gleaming with the combined technologies of 7 different species. Around it, the largest fleet in galactic history prepared to deliver what the Council termed corrective guidance to an ungrateful species. "Admiral, our scouts report successful reconnaissance of the outer human colonies," announced Commander Vextel, his insectoid features clicking with satisfaction. "The humans appear to be concentrating their forces in the Sol system, exactly as predicted." "Excellent. And our intelligence assets within their government?" Corzin asked, referring to the network of agents the Council believed they had successfully placed among humanity. Complete radio silence. Either they've been compromised or the humans have implemented communication protocols we cannot penetrate. Agent Vorth suggests this indicates desperation rather than sophisticated countermeasures. Korzen nodded, though something about the situation troubled him. In his 2 centuries of military service, he had never encountered a species that simply stopped communicating. Even the most primitive civilizations attempted to negotiate when faced with overwhelming force. Humanity's silence suggested either complete panic or dangerous confidence. "Show me the fleet disposition," he ordered. The holographic display materialized above the command platform, showing the positions of 312 council vessels arranged in a complex formation designed to surround and isolate human space. Each ship represented the pinnacle of its species' technological development, and together they constituted enough firepower to sterilize dozens of worlds. "The Hegemony Dreadnought Squadron will approach from Galactic North," Commander Vextal reported, indicating the massive vessels with their distinctive angular profiles. "The collective consciousness ships will move in from the eastern spiral, ARM, while our mobile battle platforms establish blocking positions to prevent human escape. And the pacification units?" "Standing by in the reserve formation. The Strategic Ethics Committee has authorized their deployment if human resistance exceeds acceptable parameters." Korzen studied the tactical projections with growing unease. The pacification units were equipped with biological weapons designed to eliminate specific genetic markers. They represented the Council's ultimate solution for species deemed incompatible with galactic civilization. "Admiral," interrupted the communication officer, her crystalline form shimmering with incoming data streams, "we're receiving final authorization codes from the Council Central Command. Operation Shepherding is approved for immediate execution." "Very well. Signal all ships. Begin approach to human space. Maintain formation integrity and prepare for possible resistance." As the massive fleet began its coordinated movement toward Sol System, Korzen reflected on the necessity of what they were about to do. The Council had spent thousands of years creating a stable, peaceful galactic civilization. Species like humanity, with their chaotic individualism and aggressive expansion, threatened the carefully maintained balance that protected billions of lives. "Admiral, we're detecting unusual quantum fluctuations from the direction of human space," reported the sensor officer. "The pattern is unfamiliar, but the energy readings are significant." "Could it be a weapon system?" Korzen asked, though he doubted the humans possessed technology advanced enough to threaten council ships. "Unlikely. The quantum signature suggests dimensional manipulation, but we have no record of humans developing such capabilities. It might be an attempt at faster-than-light communication or emergency transportation." Korzen made a note to investigate these readings once they entered human space. The Council's technological superiority had been built over millennia of careful development and species cooperation. If humans had somehow developed new technologies independently, it could represent a significant intelligence failure. "Time to Sol System?" he asked. 47 hours at current velocity. The human fleet appears to be taking defensive positions around their primary star. Let them. A defensive posture will make our task easier. Signal the Fleet Intelligence Division. I want psychological profiles of their key commanders. If we can identify their decision-making patterns, we might be able to end this with minimal casualties. Commander Vextal accessed the intelligence files, his expression growing thoughtful. "Admiral, there's something unusual about human military doctrine. Their tactical manuals emphasize adaptation and improvisation to an extent we've never encountered. They seem to view established strategy as guidelines rather than absolute principles." "Meaning what exactly?" "They're unpredictable. Most species develop military doctrines based on mathematical optimization and historical precedent. Humans appear to prize creativity and unconventional thinking above tactical efficiency." This was troubling news. The Council's strategic planning relied heavily on behavioral prediction models. If humans couldn't be counted on to respond rationally to superior force, the operation might require more extensive measures than originally planned. "What about their technological capabilities?" Korzen asked. "Standard energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, and nuclear fusion drives. nothing that should pose a significant threat to Council shielding systems. However, their ship designs emphasize speed and maneuverability over defensive capability. They appear to favor hit-and-run tactics. Then we'll ensure they have nowhere to run. Signal the containment squadrons. Establish a perimeter at maximum weapons range. I want every possible escape route covered. As the hours passed, Korzen found himself increasingly puzzled by human behavior. Intelligence reports indicated that humans were evacuating their outer colonies, but the evacuation seemed incomplete and poorly organized. They were abandoning valuable infrastructure and strategic positions without apparent military logic. "Admiral, we're now within sensor range of human space," announced the navigation officer. "Deploying long-range reconnaissance probes." The first detailed scans of human territory revealed something unexpected. While the main fleet was indeed concentrated around Sol, there were significant gaps in their defensive coverage. Several strategic positions had been abandoned entirely, and others showed minimal defensive preparations. "They're not even trying to defend their colonial worlds," observed Commander Vextal. "This level of strategic abandonment suggests either complete incompetence or what?" Korzen demanded. "Or they're planning something we haven't anticipated. Admiral, these quantum fluctuations are increasing in intensity. Whatever the humans are building, it's approaching activation." Korzen studied the sensor data with growing concern. The energy readings from the outer Sol system were unlike anything in Council databases. The quantum resonance patterns suggested technology that shouldn't exist, at least not in the hands of a species barely 5 centuries old. Commander signal. "The fleet increase velocity to maximum sustainable speed. I want to reach human space in 36 hours. Admiral, that will strain our formation integrity and exhaust fuel reserves. Do it anyway. Something about this situation is very wrong, and I don't want to give the humans any more time to prepare whatever they're planning." As the Council fleet accelerated toward their target, Korzen couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The humans' behavior patterns didn't match any known species profiles. They were either completely irrational or operating from strategic principles that the Council had never encountered. "Admiral," called the intelligence officer, "we've lost contact with our reconnaissance probes." All 3 units went silent simultaneously as they approached the outer system. Technical malfunction? Unlikely. The quantum interference from human space is increasing exponentially. It's almost as if they're charging some kind of massive energy weapon. Korzen stared at the tactical display, watching his fleet advance toward an enemy that refused to behave according to established military doctrine. For the first time in his career, he found himself questioning whether the Council truly understood the species they were about to confront. "Signal all ships, prepare for immediate combat deployment upon arrival. And Commander, activate the pacification units. Something tells me we're going to need them." Dr. Elizabeth Harper wiped the sweat from her forehead as she made the final adjustments to the gateway's quantum field generators. Around her, hundreds of technicians worked with desperate efficiency, knowing that humanity's survival depended on completing their work before the Council fleet arrived. The massive construction project had become a race against time, with the finish line measured in hours rather than days. "Dr. Harper, we're showing instability in the tertiary stabilization matrix," called out Chief Engineer Rodriguez from his position at the main control console. "The quantum resonance is fluctuating beyond safe parameters." "Compensate with the secondary field generators," Harper replied, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "We don't have the luxury of perfect calibration. If the system can hold together for 30 minutes, that's all we need." The gateway had evolved far beyond its original design specifications. What had begun as a transportation device had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. A weapon capable of manipulating the fundamental forces of space-time itself. The theoretical physics were sound, but the practical implementation was entering uncharted territory. "Ma'am, Admiral Rodriguez is requesting a status update," announced Lieutenant Peterson from the communication station. Harper activated the quantum link to the command center on Ceres. "Admiral, we're 18 hours from potential activation. The targeting computers are online, and we've successfully locked onto the Council fleet's quantum signatures using Morrison's intelligence data." What about the risk assessment, Doctor? Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of impossible decisions. If everything works perfectly, we can disable the entire Council fleet without affecting our own ships. If the targeting systems fail, we might accidentally tear apart local spacetime. If the primary generators overload, we could create a black hole that consumes the solar system. And if we don't try, then the Council fleet arrives in 36 hours and implements their genocide protocol. Admiral, I've run the calculations 1,000 times. This is our only chance. Harper closed the communication link and returned to the technical preparations. The gateway stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, its exotic matter framework held together by force fields that defied conventional physics. At its heart, a carefully controlled singularity provided the massive energy requirements for dimensional manipulation. Dr. Harper called Dr. Chen from the theoretical physics station. I'm detecting resonance patterns from the approaching Council fleet. Their bioorganic hulls are creating quantum signatures we didn't account for in our targeting algorithms. This was exactly the kind of last-minute complication Harper had feared. The gateway's targeting system relied on precise quantum identification to distinguish between friendly and hostile vessels. If the Council ships were generating unexpected signatures, the weapon might not function as intended. Can we compensate? Harper asked, already knowing the answer would be complex. Possibly, but it would require real-time adjustments during activation. We'd essentially be modifying the targeting parameters while the dimensional field is active. One miscalculation could redirect the effect toward Earth instead of the Council fleet. Harper closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 3 billion human lives resting on her decisions. The gateway represented humanity's greatest scientific achievement, but it was also the most dangerous device ever constructed. They were attempting to weaponize forces that could reshape reality itself. Do it, she decided. Set up the real-time modification protocols. We'll adjust the targeting as we go. Ma'am, that's incredibly risky. We're talking about making precision modifications to a dimensional weapon while it's active. The margin for error is essentially zero. The margin for error is already zero, Dr. Chen. Either we succeed perfectly, or humanity becomes extinct. There's no middle ground. The next several hours passed in a blur of technical adjustments and system checks. Every component of the gateway had to function flawlessly for the weapon to work, and many of the systems were based on theoretical principles that had never been tested under actual conditions. Dr. Harper, we're receiving a priority transmission from Agent Morrison, announced the communication officer. Morrison's image appeared on the holographic display, his biomask flickering with quantum interference. Doctor, I'm transmitting updated intelligence on the Council fleet composition. They've activated something called pacification units. These are biological weapons designed to target human genetic markers specifically. Harper felt her blood run cold. How extensive is the threat? Complete species extinction, Doctor. The pacification units can sterilize entire planets of human life, while leaving other species unharmed. Admiral Corzine has authorization to deploy them if human resistance exceeds acceptable parameters. Then we can't fail, Harper said simply. Morrison, can you provide targeting data for these pacification units? Already included in the transmission. Doctor, there's something else. The Council suspects you're building some kind of superweapon. They're accelerating their approach and plan to arrive 6 hours ahead of schedule. Harper's stomach dropped.
How long do we have?
30 hours, maybe less. That's 12 hours earlier than our minimum activation window. We'll have to attempt startup with incomplete safety systems. Morrison's expression was grim. Doctor, if that weapon fails, the Council will implement immediate planetary sterilization. They're not planning to occupy human worlds anymore. They're planning to eliminate every trace of human civilization. The communication ended, leaving Harper and her team to absorb this final piece of devastating news. The Council had abandoned any pretense of civilized conduct. They were coming to commit genocide on a scale unprecedented in galactic history. Dr. Harper called Chief Engineer Rodriguez. We could attempt activation in 24 hours if we bypass the secondary safety systems entirely. But the risk of catastrophic failure increases to about 40%. What kind of catastrophic failure are we talking about? Uncontrolled dimensional cascade. Instead of a targeted effect, we might tear open a permanent rift in spacetime. The gravitational disturbance could eventually destabilize the entire stellar neighborhood. Harper walked to the massive viewport overlooking the gateway construction site. The structure hummed with barely contained energy, its exotic matter components glowing with the light of controlled fusion reactions. It represented the pinnacle of human engineering, created in desperation by a species fighting for its very existence. "Dr. Harper," came another voice from the communication station. "Admiral Rodriguez is requesting immediate conference with all senior staff." The holographic display activated, showing the faces of humanity's top military and civilian leaders. Admiral Rodriguez looked like she hadn't slept in days, and the strain of command was visible in every line of her face. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've received intelligence that changes our timeline significantly. The Council fleet will arrive in 28 hours, and they're carrying weapons of mass extinction. Dr. Harper, I need to know if the gateway can be activated in 24 hours. Admiral, we can attempt activation, but the risk assessment is sobering. We have about a 60% chance of destroying the Council fleet, and a 40% chance of creating a space-time disaster that makes their genocide irrelevant. And if we don't try, then in 30 hours every human being in the galaxy will be dead." Admiral Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Then we proceed with activation in 24 hours. Dr. Harper, you and your team have permission to take any risks necessary to complete the gateway. The survival of our species depends on your success." As the communication ended, Harper looked around at her team of scientists and engineers. They were all volunteers who had chosen to remain at the gateway site, despite the enormous personal risk. If the weapon failed catastrophically, they would be among the first casualties. "You heard the Admiral," Harper announced. "We have 24 hours to save humanity. Let's get back to work." The next day would determine whether the human species joined the ranks of galactic civilization or disappeared entirely from the universe. The gateway represented their final gamble, a desperate attempt to prove that freedom was worth any risk. The Council fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, like a swarm of metallic predators, their bioorganic hulls gleaming in the light of humanity's star. Admiral Corzan watched the tactical displays with growing unease as his sensors revealed the scope of human defensive preparations. The asteroid belt had been transformed into a fortress network, and space itself seemed to crackle with barely contained energy. "Admiral, we're detecting massive quantum distortions from the outer system," reported the sensor officer, her crystalline form pulsing with alarm. "The energy readings are off our scales. Whatever the humans have built, it's larger than our most advanced space stations." "Show me," Corzan ordered, his reptilian features tightening with concern. The holographic display materialized above the command platform, revealing something that defied immediate comprehension. A structure of impossible size stretched across space near Pluto's orbit, its exotic matter framework pulsing with energies that shouldn't exist according to Council science. "By the ancient void," whispered Commander Vextel. "What is that thing?" "Unknown, sir. The quantum signature suggests dimensional manipulation technology, but the scale is beyond anything in our databases. Admiral, they're generating enough energy to power a dozen star systems." Corzan felt the first stirrings of genuine fear. In 2 centuries of military service, he had never encountered technology that his sensors couldn't identify. The Council's scientific databases contained the accumulated knowledge of dozens of species spanning tens of thousands of years. If this human construction was truly unknown, it represented a fundamental shift in the balance of galactic power. "Signal the fleet. Maintain position at maximum sensor range. Deploy all reconnaissance drones and activate defensive screens." "Admiral," interrupted the communication officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. It's being broadcast on all frequencies. Put it through." The display shifted to show Admiral Rodriguez standing on the bridge of a human warship. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held the hard determination that Corzan had learned to associate with dangerous enemies. "Admiral Corzan, I'm transmitting under the ancient laws of parley. You have 30 minutes to withdraw your fleet from human space, or we will consider your presence an act of war." Corzan activated his own transmitter, his voice carrying the authority of the galactic government. "Admiral Rodriguez, you will surrender your fleet immediately and submit to Council authority. Your species has violated multiple interstellar treaties and threatened galactic stability. This is your only opportunity for peaceful resolution. Admiral Corzan, you're operating under false intelligence. Humanity has never threatened galactic stability. We've simply refused to accept systematic oppression disguised as cooperation. You have 29 minutes to withdraw." The transmission ended, leaving Corzine to contemplate humanity's audacity. They were outnumbered 4-1, facing the most powerful fleet in galactic history. Yet they were issuing ultimatums rather than begging for mercy. "Admiral," called the tactical officer, "the human fleet is moving into attack formation. 87 ships advancing from multiple vectors. And that massive structure? Energy buildup continuing to increase. Admiral, whatever they're planning to do with that thing, they're almost ready to do it." Corzine studied the tactical projections, trying to understand human strategy. Their fleet movements suggested they intended to fight rather than flee, despite being hopelessly outgunned. Either they possessed weapons technology far beyond Council intelligence estimates, or they had decided to make a suicidal last stand. "Admiral," came Agent Morrison's voice over the secured Council intelligence channel. "I'm in position to provide real-time tactical intelligence. The humans appear to be preparing some kind of superweapon." "What kind of superweapon?" Corzine asked, grateful for any insight into human intentions. "Unknown, sir. But Admiral, I recommend immediate attack before they can activate whatever they've built. The energy readings suggest something that could threaten the entire fleet." Corzine considered his options. The original plan had called for a show of overwhelming force to encourage human surrender. But if they possessed weapons capable of threatening Council ships, immediate action might be necessary. "Signal all ships. Prepare for combat operations. Target human military vessels first. Avoid civilian casualties where possible." "Admiral," interrupted the sensor officer, "we're detecting massive energy spike from the human superweapon. Whatever they're doing, activation is imminent." On the Gateway construction site, Dr. Harper stood before the main control console as the final countdown began. Around her, her team worked with desperate efficiency, making last-minute adjustments to systems that had never been tested under actual conditions. "Primary field generators at maximum output," reported Chief Engineer Rodriguez. "Dimensional matrix stable and holding." "Targeting computers online," called Dr. Chen. "We have positive locks on all Council vessels, including the pacification units." Harper took a deep breath, her finger hovering over the activation control. 3 billion human lives hung in the balance, along with the future of freedom in the galaxy. If the Gateway failed, humanity would join the ranks of species that had been shepherded into submission by the Council's systematic oppression. "All stations report ready for activation," she announced over the communication system. "Admiral Rodriguez, we are go for Gateway deployment." "Dr. Harper," came Rodriguez's voice from the Fleet Command Center. "The Council fleet is beginning their attack run. You are authorized to activate the Gateway immediately." Harper pressed the activation control. Space itself seemed to twist as the Gateway came online. The massive structure blazed with energies that bent light around its framework, creating a miniature maelstrom of controlled dimensional distortion. At the heart of the device, a carefully contained singularity began projecting its influence across interstellar distances. "Targeting the Council fleet," Harper announced, her voice steady despite the enormity of what she was attempting. "Dimensional field extending now." Admiral Corzine watched in horror as space around his fleet began to distort. Ships that had been in perfect formation suddenly found themselves separated by impossible distances. The fundamental geometry of local spacetime was being rewritten by forces beyond Council comprehension. "Admiral, our navigation systems are failing," reported the helm officer. "Space itself is becoming unstable. All ships, emergency scatter pattern," Corzine ordered. But his commands were meaningless in an environment where distance and direction had lost their conventional meaning. The Gateway's effect spread through the Council fleet like a wave of distorted reality. Ships found themselves pulled toward each other by artificial gravitational fields, while others were pushed apart by forces that defied physics. The carefully coordinated formation dissolved into chaos as 300 vessels struggled against dimensional distortions that treated matter like clay in the hands of a cosmic sculptor. "Admiral," gasped the communication officer, "we're losing contact with over half the fleet. The quantum interference is disrupting all our systems." "What about the pacification units?" "Gone, sir." "All 6 vessels have been pulled into some kind of dimensional vortex. They're no longer registering on our sensors." Corzine stared at the tactical display, watching centuries of Council technological superiority dissolve before his eyes. The humans had developed weapons that operated on principles completely outside Council science. They had weaponized space-time itself. "Admiral," came Morrison's panicked voice over the intelligence channel. "Recommend immediate retreat. The humans have technology that makes resistance impossible." But retreat was no longer an option. The Gateway's dimensional field had surrounded the Council fleet, trapping them in a region of space where normal physics no longer applied. Ships that tried to escape found themselves moving deeper into the distortion, while others discovered that their weapons wouldn't function in the altered space-time environment. "Dr. Harper," Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled over the communication system. "Effect on the Council fleet? Complete disruption of their formation and combat capability," Harper reported, monitoring the dimensional distortions through her instruments. "Their ships are intact, but they're trapped in a region of space where their weapons and navigation systems can't function properly. Can you maintain the field?" "For approximately 6 hours before we risk dimensional cascade. After that, we'll need to power down or risk tearing a permanent hole in space-time." Admiral Rodriguez smiled for the first time in weeks. 6 hours is plenty of time. Open a channel to Admiral Corzine." The communication link established itself through the quantum interference, carrying Rodriguez's voice to the trapped Council fleet. "Admiral Corzine, as you can see, the balance of power in the system has shifted dramatically. You have 2 options. Withdraw your fleet immediately and return to Council space, or spend the next several hours contemplating the consequences of underestimating human engineering." Corzine's response came through layers of static and dimensional distortion. "Minate Sev."